Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have the first of a two-part series looking at the best midfielders to own in FPL for Game Week 1 this season. In today's video we have the £7.5 to £9 million midfielders, and in part 2, which will be next week, we're looking at the midfielders that are less than £7 million. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel and you enjoy this more in-depth data where we look at the statistics, underlying data and really compare some of the players, make sure to smash that like button. If you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, in this video, like I said in the introduction, we are looking at the £7.5 to £9 million midfielders. There are actually 13 of them. Mahrez isn't included in this video just because I wanted it to be an even amount for the graphics. And also it looks like Mahrez could very well be leaving Man City. Regardless, even if he stays, he probably wouldn't be towards my sort of top 3 or 4 anyway. And it also means that we don't have Salah and we don't have De Bruyne as well. De Bruyne is injured. Salah is an excellent option. And if you were to ask me, I think Salah is better than all of the options in this list here today. But he is also 3.5 million more than the most expensive player that we're looking at today. So you have to take that into account, and it doesn't really make sense to compare him with these other midfielders that we've got here. So what we're actually going to do is go from 12th to 1st, and we're going to be looking at them in pairs. We're not necessarily making a direct comparison here. It's just that you can look at them with the next player along, and it looks nice on the graphic as well, rather than just doing one player at the time. Just wanted to say also a massive shout out to FFHUB. As I said before, they have partnered with me again this season, and all of the statistics that I'll use this season, underlying data, touch maps, fixture analyzer, all of that stuff will be exclusively from FFHUB. There will be a link in the top line of the description. If you want to get access to all of this data throughout the season, do sign up to FFHUB, 50% off at the moment. So in 12th place, I have Kai Havertz, which might be slightly unfair given that his data is actually pretty good, which we'll look at in a second, and he could really transform this Arsenal team. I do feel like alongside Ødegaard and then probably with Declan Rice in the holding position, it could be a very, very good midfield. And actually, I think Havertz has maybe got a little bit too much stick from the fans over at Chelsea since coming to the Premier League. I think he has been quite wasteful, which we'll look at a second with the statistics. But I think 12th might be a little bit harsh, but these are all great options. And for me, he is my 12th favourite out of all of them. With respect to the fixtures, Arsenal do have some really, really nice fixtures, especially those opening 3 against Forest, Palace and Fulham, 2 of those being home games as well. I do think that most of us will probably have a double up or a triple up from Arsenal. The issue is that there are so many good options to choose from with Arsenal. You've got the likes of Gabriel Jesus, Saka, Martinelli, Ødegaard, who we'll discuss later in the video. They've got really, really good defensive options in Gabriel, Saliba, Zinchenko, Ben White if you want to pay a bit more, and then even Aaron Ramsdale in goal. So there are so many options to choose from. I feel like that's where Havertz really falls short, is that we're comparing him to so many other options that we know played well for Arsenal last season. They're tried and tested, whereas Havertz is this new entity. We don't know exactly how he'll fit into this Arsenal team. And when we're looking at his statistics here, we're looking at them in pretty much what is a number 9 position. You could call it a false 9, but he's playing much further forward for Chelsea than he will do for Arsenal. We're expecting him to slot into that midfield for Arsenal and play more like a number 8, maybe pushing towards a number 10. But you've also got Ødegaard on the other side, so he's going to have to do some defensive duties. And I don't feel like he's probably going to accumulate the same goal threat that we saw for Chelsea for Arsenal. But when we look at the data, it's actually pretty good. He was sitting at a 0.58 non-penalty expected goal involvement. He's got decent goal threat at 0.39 non-penalty expected goals. Okay assist threat at 0.19. And you can see he was almost involved in one big chance per 92. The interesting thing is his FPL points were sat at 3.56 per 90, which is pretty poor, but his expected FPL points were 5.39. That means that he massively underperformed what we would have expected based on the chances that he got and the chances that he created. Now, Chelsea were an absolute mess last season, but Havertz also showed some pretty poor finishing too. So I think it was probably a combination of his teammates not finishing the chances, him not finishing his own chances as well, which meant that he underperformed and was very, very disappointing if you were a Chelsea fan. So I don't hate Havertz as an option. I love him as a footballer. I really do hope that he succeeds at Arsenal. But at the moment, I just feel like there are too many good options, especially when you compare him to the other Arsenal mids, who we'll discuss later in the video. So for me, Havertz is currently sat in 12th. And then in 11th, maybe even harsher than Havertz being in 12th, is Jack Grealish. And again, I love Grealish as an option. I love him as a footballer. But I just can't seem to get him into that top 10. The fixtures are brilliant. We've spoken about that for a while now. Man City's fixtures look really strong. Burnley, Sheffield United and Fulham in the opening 4. Obviously, 2 of those being away games, but we just expect City to overrun those kind of teams. And we probably expect them to overrun pretty much any team they come up against. The statistics are pretty similar-ish in a lot of areas. So we can see his actual FPL points were pretty good at 5.28, and his expected FPL points were 5.3. So in comparison to Havertz, who massively underperformed, Jack Grealish pretty much exactly performed how we would expect him to. His goal threat is actually lower than his assist threat, though, which is different to Havertz. And generally with midfielders, I do prefer a goal threat than an assist threat, but as you can see here, he does still accumulate some goal threat at 0.22 non-penalty expected goals, and he does accumulate a reasonably good assist threat at 0.33 expected assist. And what that basically means, if you're new to stats, is every 3 games, if he plays 90 minutes, we would expect him to accumulate 1 expected assist, which isn't great, but it's decent enough at 7.5, and he's involved in roughly the same amount of big chances that Kai Havertz is. So these are 2 options that I don't hate. If you were to show me a draft with Havertz and Grealish at 7.5, I'd say that's absolutely fine. But for me, there are 10 better options. And I would love to, by the way, at the end of the video, once you've looked at all of these players, I would love for you to list the 12 of them in the order that you think. So once you've watched the entirety of this, list from 1 to 12, and let's see how similar it is to my list. But neither of these make the top 10. So let's take a look at 10th and 9th. So in 10th and 9th, we actually have the double Liverpool boys of Diogo Jota and Luis Diaz. Jota coming in at 8, Luis Diaz coming in at 7.5. We, of course, also have Gakpo and Darwin to choose from, but they are both forwards. And we have Salah, but he is up at 12.5 million. So if you're looking for a mid-price midfielder, you do have the choice of Jota or Diaz. And unfortunately, the only reason they're really in 10th and 9th is just not knowing who's going to start. We've got Salah, who starts pretty much every game on the right. Then through the middle, it's probably a combination of Gakpo/Darwin/Jota. Probably Gakpo and Jota are first choice, but Jota can start on the left too. And then on the left, you've got one of Diaz, Jota, and Darwin. Realistically, what we're looking at is 4 players for 2 positions. And as a result, it's really tricky to try and start with one of these when you have other options that are really, really nailed with good data, playing in good teams with good fixtures. It just feels like an unnecessary risk to take. However, if you were to confirm either Jota or Diaz's minutes to me and say they were going to start the majority of games and get good minutes, they would probably be in the top 3 or 4 players for me, because Liverpool are an attacking outfit. Even last season, when people were saying they were really poor, and they were still accumulating an incredible amount of chances. They were still in the top 4 for expected goals as a team. And the attackers still score goals and get assists. And realistically, we don't care if Liverpool win from an FPL perspective. We just need the attackers to get returns. And I think they will continue to do so regardless of how Liverpool do. It's just the minutes that are really tricky. Maybe fixtures are a bit of a mixed bag over the opening 5, but they start to improve after that. But they do have 2 home fixtures against Bournemouth and Villa. And to finish Chelsea away on the opening day, it might not look great on paper, but that's not a terrible fixture, especially as Chelsea will probably take a little bit of time to acclimatise under new management. Jota is just exceptional. His data continues to be brilliant. In a similar vein to Darwin, how I spoke about last season, Jota has always, and probably always will have, brilliant data. He is a chance magnet. He just gets chances, he gets tap-ins, he gets headers. And as you can see by his data here, he was sat at a 0.83 non-penalty expected goal involvement last season, which is probably, I think, the best out of all of the players we're going to look at in the video today. So if Jota's minutes were secure, I would absolutely love him as an option, but we just don't know that they are secure. As we can see here, both Jota and Diaz got 51 minutes and 58 minutes per game on average last season. Yes, they both suffered from injuries, and yes, Liverpool were trying new things, and it was all a bit up in the air last season, but this kind of sums up the issue that we've got, that we can't even confirm that they'll average 60 minutes per game. And the issue that we've got now is that all of the players are currently fit, and if they start the season with all the players currently fit, it makes it even more difficult to try and predict who's going to start. If you are choosing between the 2 of them, the reason that I've currently got Diaz in 9th and Jota in 10th isn't the statistics, because as you can see, Jota has much better statistics, is because I think that Diaz is slightly more nailed. I would say that probably the 3 most nailed players in order is probably Salah, then probably Gakpo, then Diaz, then maybe Darwin and Jota after that. That's just my hunch. If you're a Liverpool fan watching this, please let me know in the comments. Do you think Diaz is more nailed than Jota? If not, could you please explain the reasoning for that? It's one of those things where hopefully pre-season gives us some information. But if you're just going off of the statistics, I much prefer Jota. If you're going off of expected minutes, they probably are quite similar, but I just about prefer Diaz. Let me know down below if you are looking at either of these. Of course, with Diaz, you do save 0.5, but when you look at the stats, if you think they're going to get similar minutes, you've just got to go with Jota. He's a much greater goal threat. We're looking at almost double the expected goals here. And I feel like he is actually a really good finisher as well, Jota. He can be frustrating at points, but I do feel like he will tend to convert some of those chances too. So Liverpool boys just due to expected minutes in 10th and 9th. Maybe at the end of pre-season, if we readdress this, if one of them look like they're getting the majority of starts, then they could make their way into sort of the top 3, top 4 for me. And I could end up starting with one Liverpool attacker in game week 1. But for now, they're 10th and 9th. Let's move on to 8th and 7th. So for me, I would say from 9th to 12th was fairly comfortable. I would say that they were my bottom 4. From 8th to 1st, I could quite easily see these changing around, and it's probably quite controversial, and I don't particularly like it myself, having Martinelli and Ødegaard in 8th and 7th, considering how well they did last season, and considering they are playing in what is probably the second best team in the Premier League with really nice opening fixtures. So I will hold my hands up and say I don't particularly like this. I just really fancy some of the other players from 1st to 6th, which we'll discuss when we get there. But all of this to say, I love both of these as options. I wouldn't at all try and convince you to take either of these out of your team. I don't necessarily like them personally myself as a replacement for Saka. But in addition to Saka, I love it. And as you'll see throughout the week and maybe into next week as well when we review some people's drafts, I've actually seen people on triple Arsenal attack where they've got Saka, Jesus, and then one of Martinelli and Ødegaard. And I love that. It's high upside. You don't necessarily need to cover the Arsenal defence. And the Arsenal attackers will probably continue to provide. But like I said, just the reason they're in 8th and 7th is just because I like 6 other options slightly more, not necessarily because I don't like these. We spoke about the fixtures already, especially those opening 3 are really strong. Man United's not necessarily the trickiest fixture. It is at home too. Then Everton away. These really are nice opening fixtures for Arsenal. And on top of that, they are a brilliant team with really, really good data going forward too. When we're comparing the two of them, if they were to get equal minutes, I prefer Martinelli. And I would actually say if Martinelli got the same sort of minutes that we're expecting Saka to get, I would probably push Martinelli towards the top 4 on this list here. The main reason that Martinelli is in 8th is because I still don't expect him to quite get the same amount of minutes that Ødegaard and Saka get. However, I'll hold my hands up once again and say that I got this very wrong last season. Last season, I sold Martinelli and I sold Ben White just before they both went on that really good run. Ben White was getting assists. Martinelli was scoring left, right and centre because I thought Martinelli's minutes were at risk with Trossard signing and with Smith Rowe potentially returning from injury. That didn't happen in the end. So I'm not saying that this is definitely going to be the case. I just still don't feel like he's quite as nailed as Ødegaard and Saka. That's the only reason he's in 8th. But again, Arsenal fans, let me know. Do you think he's 100% first choice? And if he is, are we overlooking him? Because he's only 8 million. I know he's up at 14% ownership, but I haven't seen a massive amount of drafts with Martinelli. And he is cheaper than the likes of Ødegaard and Fernandes and Saka and Rashford. So I do really like him. The stats are pretty good at 0.66 non-penalty expected goal involvement. As you can see by his touch map as well, he gets into the box a hell of a lot, which is why his big chance involvement is up at 0.9 per 92. So Martinelli is a goal threat. He's creative too. He gets into the box a lot. He does take the odd set piece, as you can see as well. He takes corners from that side with the in-swinging corner. I love him as an option. If in pre-season he looks really, really nailed again, we get some positive quotes from Arteta, and I'm looking for around an £8 million midfielder, I could see myself starting with Martinelli, but just for now, I'm a little bit worried about the minutes. And Ødegaard is probably not quite as good of an option as Martinelli, but I do think he's more nailed, and his statistics certainly aren't bad. We're looking at a 0.53 non-penalty expected goal involvement, which is pretty good for 8.5 million. He did slightly overperform his expected FPL points, as did Martinelli, so maybe we'll see a little bit of regression from them too this year. His big chance involvement, we're looking at 1 big chance involvement every 2 or 3 games, which is decent enough, and a bit of an equal split between expected goals and expected assists, but he's never putting up elite numbers, Ødegaard. He did for a very short spell, like 3 or 4 games, but outside of that, he puts up very consistent numbers. He'll create you chances. He'll tick along with the odd assist and the goal. But I don't necessarily think he's the player that will explode week upon week upon week at the start of the season. I think you're more likely to get that from someone like a Martinelli or one of the first 6 options. So at the moment, 8th and 7th, I do really like them. Let me know down below if you are going to own either of these. But now let's get into the tasty bit, which is the top 6. So moving on to 6th and 5th, we have 2 players that at the moment aren't in many drafts. We've got 5% owned Heung-min Son and 11% owned Phil Foden. And I love both of these, and I've been trying to get both into a lot of my drafts because I feel like both have huge upside. But let's be honest, they both had incredibly disappointing seasons last season. In particular, Heung-min Son, who still got a few goals, but in general, in comparison to the season before, very, very disappointing. And Phil Foden, of course, had, I would say, a very disappointing season for him. Again, still got some attacking returns. Of course, City won the treble. But from a personal perspective, I can't imagine that Phil Foden was overly happy with his season. And it feels like a very, very big season for both of these players here on the back of that potentially shaky previous season. Now, I will admit that if we're going off of statistics here, these should probably not be in 5th and 6th from last season, but they've both shown at various points in the season before that they do have very high ceilings, and they are both goal threats. We tend to see, on average, both Heung-min Son and Foden put up higher expected goals than expected assists. They are more of a goal threat than they are a creative force, and that's what we tend to want from the players that we pick in FPL, unless the creativity is at like Fernandes or De Bruyne level, where they're just creating so many chances. We tend to want them to get closer to goal and more chance of scoring because that's where we get the most points and the most bonus points too. And Heung-min Son at 9 million feels like he could be underpriced, depending what version of Son we get. Now, we know he was struggling with a hernia. He's just had his operation. Hopefully, he will have recovered in time for Game Week 1, which it looks like he will have. And if it was just a result of him playing with a bit of discomfort and pain, it could be that we see the Heung-min Son of old. And if that is the case, he is mega underpriced at 9 million. You need to remember how good this man was a couple of seasons ago. And the fixtures after Game Week 3 look really, really strong. And this goes for both Chelsea and Spurs. But a lot of people aren't picking any Chelsea and any Spurs. Maybe rightly so because of the changes in management. But from Game Week 3, both of those teams have really strong fixtures. And if you can get a Heung-min Son in there ahead of the curve, and he has a pretty good Game Week 1 and 2, everyone will be clamoring to get him for Game Week 3. You'll absorb all of that team value, and you'll also own a player that is about to go on probably what will be quite a hot streak. So I like Son. His statistics and his touch map, as you can see, really disappointing last season. I mean, he's barely getting into the box, which just isn't the Son that we know. Yes, he's on corners as well, which is a massive advantage. We'll have to see if he keeps that under new management. But he's just not getting into the box enough there. His data was at about a 0.55 non-penalty expected goal involvement, which was a bit of a drop-off from the previous season. But also, he wasn't converting. And this is the strange thing about Son last season. As you can see, his FPL points were 4.72. But his expected FPL points were 5.25. Heung-min Son has always been one of those players that overperforms his expected data. He's an exceptional finisher, and on a consistent basis, he will score chances that you don't expect him to. Last season, we saw the opposite of that. And I feel like that's one of the main reasons that he struggled, not just because he was struggling to create opportunities, but he wasn't finishing the ones that he got. So it is a bit of a leap of faith, and he is 1.5 million more than his teammate Maddison, who is also a good option. So you need to be willing to pay that. But if you are willing to pay 9 million, I feel like he could be a nice differential, only 5% owned to get a £9 million Son. At the moment, he's in 6th, though. I just prefer Foden, mainly due to the price tag. But also, I just love Phil Foden, and I just feel like he could start the season on fire. With De Bruyne probably missing Game Week 1, or almost definitely missing Game Week 1. With Mahrez looking like he could be off. Gundogan's already been sold. There have been rumours about Bernardo Silva. They probably won't sell both Mahrez and Silva. But there are lots of issues at the moment at Man City with injuries and players being sold. It almost feels like Phil Foden has to start. Now, I don't know where he'll start. If Mahrez is sold, he could start on the right wing. He could compete with Grealish on the left. He could play like left centre mid, which is the Gundogan role. He could play right centre mid, which is essentially like the De Bruyne role. There are so many positions that he could play in this team. Surely he's got to get into that starting 11. And I feel like any of those positions, he could get on the score sheet, and he could be a really nice option for one of the opening game weeks. So yes, his data wasn't great last year. 0.33 non-penalty expected goals, 0.29 expected assists. By the way, that is still very good, but in comparison to previous seasons, maybe a bit of a drop-off. I love him as an option. As you can see by the touch map, even last season, he gets into the box a hell of a lot. Like I said, he's a real goal threat, and he's very direct, and he's quite greedy at points too. So I really like Foden. Foden's actually been in the majority of my drafts, unless I switch to a 4-4-2. So I've got a bit of a soft spot for him, but I will concede that he's probably not in the top 4 options for midfielders at that price point. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the top 4. So, into the top 4 we go, and in 4th place we have James Maddison. This is just my personal opinion. I think he'll be a brilliant option in FPL this season, and I really do want to start with him in Game Week 1. I feel like he's such good value at 7.5, especially when you compare to Heung-min Son, saving 1.5 million and still getting a very good Spurs attacker. Feels like really, really nice savings there, and you can use that money elsewhere. His data has always been very good. Actually, last season it was slightly disappointing, but he always tends to put up pretty decent data. And I do just really think he's going to do well at Spurs. I think he's exactly what they're calling out for. I think under the new management, he's going to excel there. We don't know exactly what role he'll play, but by all accounts, it looks like he'll continue to play a number 10 role, and he'll be able to get into the box to score goals and to create chances as well. And I feel like if he can feed the likes of Son and Kane, and this is assuming, of course, that Kane stays at Spurs, I feel like he'll be a brilliant FP option. If Kane leaves, I will almost definitely not have Maddison. That isn't to say that I don't think Spurs can do well, and of course they'll probably make another signing. I just can't see Maddison being an exceptional FPL option if Kane isn't there for him to feed and to bounce off of as well, because we know how good Kane is at assisting. I can imagine Maddison making some forward runs and Kane slipping him in on goal. But I think Kane will stay at Spurs. If he doesn't, then Maddison probably drops down to 6th, 7th, 8th for me, and I'm probably looking at one of the other options. His data last season was actually slightly disappointing. We're seeing about a 0.52 non-penalty expected goal involvement, which isn't terrible, but it is a bit of drop-off from what we've seen in previous seasons at about a 0.6 non-penalty expected goal involvement. He pretty much performed exactly how we expected based on the data, and he got some attacking returns, but across the last 4 or 5 seasons, Maddison is up there in the top 5 in the Premier League for goals and assists, so we know he can get that output He just struggled last season in what was a struggling Leicester side. So I don't think we should take too much of that into account. I think we should look at Maddison over the data sample that we have, which is a very, very big sample size. And we know that he is very good at scoring goals and very good at creating goals too. There's a very good chance that he'll be on a lot of set pieces for Spurs as well, which I like. The one thing I would say about Maddison is you don't need to start the season with him. Spurs' good fixtures start from game week 3 onwards. So what you could do is start with someone like an Ødegaard or a Martinelli who have 2 really nice fixtures to open up with. And then if Maddison does look good, you can then move to him after that because both Martinelli and Ødegaard are more than Maddison. Start with them. And even if Maddison does rise in price in the opening 2, you can still afford to go there. That's probably the safer way to do it. I've just got a bit of a feeling that Maddison's going to start well, and I don't think Brentford and Man United are terrible fixtures. So I like the idea of starting with him, saving a transfer, not banking one, and I think for game week 3 onwards, you are then one step ahead of everyone else. If they don't have any Spurs and Chelsea players who have a really nice fixture swing in game week 3, then they're going to be really, really struggling to catch up with you there, and you're going to be one step ahead of the crowd. So I like that as an option. Then in third place, I've got Bruno Fernandes. Now, he almost made it into the top 2. I just think that there are 2 slightly better options than Bruno. But as a Manchester United fan, I think that Bruno is going to have an exceptional season. And assuming he stays fit and assuming Manchester United don't completely capitulate and have a terrible season, I would comfortably predict that Bruno's going to get another 200-point season. I just feel like he's got that in his locker. I feel like last season he was very unlucky on a lot of occasions. You can see he did underperform his expected FPL points. And I don't think he's a poor finisher. I feel like the players that he was sliding in a lot of the time were finishing very, very poorly. So hopefully Rashford continues to finish the chances. Hopefully we sign a number 9 and whoever we sign will finish some of the chances that Bruno Fernandes creates too. I just feel like he's going to have a really strong season. I feel like he was incredibly underrated from a footballing perspective last season. He got so many chances. He created so many chances. He was the absolute engine in that midfield. And even with the signing of Mason Mount, I still feel like Bruno Fernandes will get forward a lot. And I don't think the signing of Mason Mount will make Bruno Fernandes that much more defensive. However, this is one that I really, really, really do want to assess in pre-season because if we start to see a situation where when Mount and Fernandes are both on the pitch, Mount is the one that gets more forward and Bruno Fernandes is the one that sits, then all of a sudden we might have a potential issue. The reason I don't think that will be the case is because one of Mount's best characteristics is moving the ball forward, progressive ball carries. And I feel like that is one of the reasons that Ten Hag has bought him. Now, you can still do that from a slightly more advanced position, but it seems silly to push Bruno Fernandes back and then push Mason Mount forward when we've probably signed Mason Mount to do that very thing, which is collect the ball a little bit more deep and carry it forward. So I like Mason Mount coming into the team. I still feel like it will make us better as a team, and I feel like it actually will improve the way Fernandes plays, but we'll have to see that in pre-season. If Fernandes is playing a slightly deeper role, then of course he moves out of the top 4. Again, he probably moves into 6th or 7th, and I won't be considering Bruno Fernandes. But as things stand, I really like him. The fixtures are a bit of a mixed bag for Manchester United, but Wolves at home and Forest at home in the opening 3 is really nice. And across the first 8 or 9, which is probably when we'll start to look to play the first wildcard, I really like Bruno Fernandes as an option. I think 8.5 is excellent value. And at the moment, he has been in a lot of my teams. I would love to know down below in the comments, are you going to own either Maddison or Fernandes? In my latest draft, I have one of them, which is Maddison. And I've actually sold Bruno Fernandes for the player in second. So without further ado, let's look at second and first. So in second and first, we do have Marcus Rashford and Bukayo Saka. And these are both currently in my FPL draft. Now, the reason that Marcus Rashford hasn't been in a ton is I am struggling to find that extra 0.5 to go from Bruno Fernandes to Marcus Rashford. Do I think it's worth it? Yes, just about. If there was a million between them, let's say Marcus Rashford was 9.5 and Fernandes was 8.5, then maybe I wouldn't. But for just an extra 0.5, Marcus Rashford is just a much greater goal threat than Bruno. Of course, Bruno has much better assist threat, but most of the time, and again, I was watching a compilation of Bruno's best bits last season, almost every single time that Bruno slid someone in on goal, it was Marcus Rashford. And a lot of the time, Rashford was finishing those. Of course, he misses the odd chunk as well, but I just feel like if Fernandes is accumulating points through assists, then Marcus Rashford is probably accumulating points through goals. Even if we sign a number 9 and Marcus Rashford's playing on the left, I still feel like Rashford will be the one that is running in behind. And that goal threat is so important with midfielders because it's better for bonus points. You get the extra points for the goal too. And just over time, it does really accumulate. If a player's just ticking along with the odd assist here and there versus the odd goal here and there, by the end of the season or across maybe even a 6 to 8 game week spell, that does start to tally up. So I feel like just due to the added goal threat, Marcus Rashford probably is worth the extra money over Bruno. That isn't to say that Bruno isn't a good option, though. He's on penalties. He's on a lot of set pieces as well, corners and free kicks. And in and of his own right, his data is exceptionally good. So what I'm actually thinking is, we should probably just consider Rashford and Bruno in isolation. Rashford is one player, Bruno is another player. Maybe don't consider it as one or the other. Don't consider it as a double up and just think, do I want Bruno? Maybe. Do I want Rashford? Probably. So should we just potentially have both of them in our teams? The issue is that we've got the Arsenal midfielders, we've got Foden, we've got Son, we've got Maddison, all of the players we've discussed here. So it's not easy to get double Manchester United midfield in there. But I feel like maybe there's a bit of fallacy in the way we're thinking here, that it's a double up and that we're owning two Man United attackers. Should we not just consider them as each individual players, because they will get their each individual points too? So that's just a little thought process. Let me know down below what you think of that. But I don't mind having both Rashford and Bruno. Just to quickly point to Rashford's stats, because I was surprised. I hadn't actually looked at Rashford's stats across the entire season until this video. His stats were really, really strong. 6.41 expected FPL points, 0.59 non-penalty expected goals, which I believe is the best or second best in this list, along with Diogo Jota. 0.23 expected assists, so he was still creative too. And 1.25 big chance involvement per 90. So he's been involved in at least one big chance, whether that's creating or getting the big chance himself, every single game, which is absolutely massive. I was really shocked about how good those stats were. And his finishing was actually pretty good last season too. So since seeing this and since doing my own research and having more of a think, I do want Marcus Rashford in there. I'd quite like Bruno as well, though. That's the tricky situation. But there are only so many spots that we have. In first place is Bukayo Saka. And I've thought about how I can justify this, because the data's not good. It's just not. And it wasn't last season. And it was one of the main reasons that I didn't own Saka. But data isn't everything. And he passes the eye test. He's getting into the right positions. He is still getting FPL points as well. He appears to be a very good finisher. He's very nailed for the second best team in the league. He's on penalties too. And he is progressing year on year due to his age. So I feel like you don't just look at the previous season. You think, is he going to continue to improve? I genuinely do think he will. Does he have multiple routes to points? Yes, he's on some corners, as you can see here. Some free kicks. He's on penalties. Is he nailed? Yes. Are the fixtures good? Yes. What more can you really ask for from a mid-price midfielder? There's not much. It would be nice to see the stats slightly higher. I mean, we're only looking at a 0.48 non-penalty expected goal involvement here. But obviously the penalties do tally that up a little bit. And we're only looking at a 0.54 big chance involvement per 90. And that does include the penalties that he took. It actually drops below 0.4 per 90 if you take the pens out. So by all accounts, Saka does not have great data. And if you are a very data-driven manager, which I guess I actually am, it might not look great, but I do feel like you need to use your eyes a little bit and you do need to take into account other factors. And I still feel like of the bunch, just due to everything that I've just mentioned there, for me, Saka is still the best mid-priced option in the midfield, but only just ahead of the likes of Marcus Rashford and Bruno Fernandes. So those are the 12 midfielders ranked from 12th to 1st. I would love to know down below in the comments, how would you rank them? If you're too lazy to type out all 12, maybe just give me your top 3 or 4. Who are your top 3 or 4 midfielders in order? And I would love to know how much it differs. I think the most controversial opinion in all of this is probably putting Foden in 5th and also having Martinelli and Ødegaard quite low down. But outside of that, I think most of you will probably roughly agree with this, but I would love to know your opinions down below. And like I said, make sure to drop a like. If you do want to see the next part of this, which is the cheaper midfielders, drop loads of comments, drop loads of likes, make sure to subscribe so that I know you want to see the next video. Just to finish up, as I said at the start, I wanted to give a massive shout out to Fantasy Football Hub, because all of the stats that I used in this video is all courtesy of them. I absolutely love their site. I'll be exclusively using it throughout the season. And now is the time to sign up if you want. So if you want all of that data that I just had there, all easily accessible, you can do different player comparisons too. As you can see, a fixture analyzer, the My Team feature, which will be coming very soon, points predictions, articles, team reveals. You can get all of that for as little as £3 per month if you use my link in the description. And also on top of that, if you do want to support me in the channel, it does massively support me as well. And it will mean that I'll continue to work with Fantasy Football Hub in the future. So massive shout out to them. Massive shout out to you for watching. Thank you very much. So guys, there you have it. That is part 1 of this 2-part series looking at the best midfielders to own in FPL for Game Week 1 this season. If you did enjoy the video and you're looking forward to part 2 and you actually want me to make part 2, make sure to drop a like on this video. Let's aim for 1,500 likes. Drop a comment down below. And if you are new to the channel and you've not yet subscribed, I would really appreciate it. We're going to aim for 80,000 subscribers by Game Week 1. So if you've not yet subscribed, make sure to do it. But until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.